It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. A second baby in Downing Street for the Prime Minister, as his wife says she feels blessed. Carrie Johnson also reveals she suffered a miscarriage earlier this year and says by sharing, she hopes she might help others. Also tonight, the effort to encourage young people to get jabbed as they're told they won't have to have them to enter university. Team GB's switch around Saturday with success for its swimmers, but sadness for its leading sprinting star. The parents whose children are waiting for a specialist bed suffering from eating disorders.
I think a lot of English comes from Latin, so it would be a good skill to learn.
One of the classics, the push to bring Latin learning into more schools. And we'll take a full look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Hello, good evening. The Prime Minister and his wife are expecting a second baby and have revealed they lost another at the start of the year. Carrie Johnson said that had left her heartbroken, but that she now felt blessed. The child, due at Christmas, will be Boris Johnson's seventh. Our political correspondent, Rob Powell, reports.
The G7 summit in June. Mingling with world leaders, we now know the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie Johnson, was pregnant. A second child for the couple, revealed in an Instagram post saying they were hoping for a rainbow baby this Christmas, a reference to a new arrival for a family who have previously lost a child. In the post, Mrs. Johnson wrote, "At the beginning of the year, I had a miscarriage which left me heartbroken. I feel incredibly blessed to be pregnant again, but I've also felt like a bag of nerves." She went on to say fertility issues can be really hard for many people, particularly when on platforms like Instagram, it can look like everything is only ever going well. I found it a real comfort to hear from people who had also experienced loss, so I hope that in some very small way, sharing this might help others too.
It's important, I think, to talk about pregnancy after loss because it can be a very anxious time. I think a lot of people say that they lose the kind of innocence and optimism that they had first time round because they're always concerned that something might go wrong this time.
The couple's first child, Wilfred, was born in April last year, in the teeth of the first wave of COVID, and just weeks after the Prime Minister left hospital after contracting the virus. While this is Carrie Johnson's second child, it will be the Prime Minister's seventh. He has four with his second wife, Marina Wheeler, who are all now in their 20s, and a younger daughter he fathered after an affair with an art consultant. While Downing Street babies are, by historical standards, quite rare, in recent years this famous address has played host to several newborns. Tony Blair became a father for the fourth time in 2000. Baby Leo was the first child born to a sitting Prime Minister in 150 years. 10 years later, and David Cameron and his wife welcomed baby Florence to number 10. Married in secret in May, Boris and Carrie Johnson rarely speak about their private lives. By sharing such intimate and tragic details of their loss earlier this year, the couple clearly hope their experience will help others who have been through the pain of miscarriage. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
The government is trying to encourage more young people to get vaccinated, though it's dropped a plan that will require jabs to allow students to enter halls of residence at their university or college. Ireland's Prime Minister said today that his country now had a higher proportion of people fully protected than the UK. 26,144 new cases of coronavirus were reported in the latest 24-hour period, and a further 71 people have died. The total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test is now 129,654. 35,773 first doses of a COVID vaccine were given, and 164,295 people received their second dose. That means 38.13 million people are now fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Well, the government wants to encourage more, as Harriet Hadfield reports from West Sussex.
Glorious Goodwood, a fixture of the summer calendar. Tens of thousands of people coming together to have a good time. Trackside, something pretty unusual, a pop-up vaccination clinic. aimed at the casual grab-a-jab racegoer and a younger audience.
It's a big change because obviously we were doing in mass vac centres or in converted town halls, GP surgeries, etc. And then what we've found is that obviously we're not hitting our targets with the 18 to 25 group, which is variable, sort of 35% here, 40% elsewhere. And so the main thing was to try to bring the vaccine to people when they were around doing something that, like an enjoying here.
With plans to ban the unjabbed from university campuses now shelved, these students think there are other ways to entice their generation.
I think convenience is definitely a big factor. Obviously, you can book things in. You might not be close to your house, it might be, but if it's at an event like this where you're going to be anyways and it takes 15 minutes out of your day, then it's really not much of an effort to actually go and get it. So I think that definitely helps.
And what about offering discounts on things if you've had your jabs? Would that work?
Yeah, definitely. Especially like students, we don't have that much money.
But what are the odds on companies forcing their employees to have the vaccine? David employs 9 people at his engineering company on the south coast.
You can't push on to people something that they don't want to do. I employ people because they want to be employed. So the vaccination programme is not within my realm to say to have it done and not to have it done.
This idea of jabs for jobs isn't something the government seems that keen to get involved in. It says while it welcomes encouraging staff, it'll be down to the employers themselves to consider how forcing them would fit with legal obligations in areas such as employment law or data protection.
I think it's a very daring move to implement such a policy, and in doing so, any employer that says I'm going to do it, they are going to face legal claims in the future.
In the quest to beat COVID, the government hopes we're in the final furlong. But what other measures can be introduced to encourage rather than force us into getting vaccinated? Harriet Hadfield, Sky News, West Sussex.
Well, Rob Powell is in Downing Street for us tonight. And Rob, the Prime Minister might be forgiven for being distracted today, but his ministers do seem to be finding every way they can to push people to get vaccinated.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that hardening in tone and policy this week, Anna, can be put down to a desire to drive vaccine uptake. Conservative MPs certainly suspect that, and I think their suspicions are fuelled by a decision today to shelve a plan to require university students to be vaccinated before heading back to campuses in September. That had only been mooted a matter of days ago, and now the government says that is not what they are planning at all. Now, one government official told me today that the plan was never likely to make it into reality, and there were several of these sorts of concepts unsubtly flying around with not much behind them other than to just drive vaccine uptake. Now, there are a few risks of that strategy. The first is that behavioural scientists are pretty clear that that kind of negative strategy, that kind of stick strategy, risks pushing people away as they react and are less inclined to get the jab. There's also a business risk, though. A speculative front page about COVID passports can do commercial damage to industries like hospitality that feel that confidence has been building recently. And also, it does a political damage to the government as well, because for a Conservative government to be introducing this, the so-called Party of Freedom, freedom-loving party, that drives MPs absolutely potty. One saying today that the university plan was wrong-headed and the government needs to start offering carrots as well as sticks. Now, I think those carrots are on the way. Several papers reporting this evening that the government will start offering discounts, benefits through companies like Uber and Deliveroo for people who do go and get their jobs. But that's not without critics either. Behavioural scientists say that risks undermining people's desire to do the right thing. They say engagement and explaining is a better option.
Rob, thank you. Well, COVID features in tomorrow's newspapers. There's the front of the Sunday Times, which says that Rishi Sunak has urged the Prime Minister to dump travel rules to save holidays. And we'll be taking a first look at all the front pages in our press preview tonight at 10:30 with the journalist and author Ella Whelan and the author and historian Peter Frankopan. The Olympic focus is turning to the track, but unfortunately, Britain's leading sprinting medal hope had to drop out today. Dina Asher-Smith, the world 200-metre champion, won't challenge for Olympic gold after revealing she has a hamstring injury. She also failed to make the 100-metre final. But it was a brighter day for Team GB's swimming team and triathletes, as our sports correspondent Tom Parmenter reports from Tokyo.
Even when you mix things up in the aquatic centre, you still get the same result: a Team GB win. Kathleen Dawson went first as the others pushed ahead. By the time Adam Peaty had stormed through the breaststroke and James Guy had flown through the butterfly, Anna Hopkin faced the final leg, knowing that US star male swimmer Caleb Dressel was hunting her down. But she touched the wall first in a world record time.
That's pretty cool. There's not many people girls that can say they've raced against Caleb Dressel, so it was a bit and won. Yeah, it's a bit daunting to know he was coming from behind, but these guys got me such a good lead. I don't think he had any hope catching us. So yeah, it was pretty cool to be a part of.
They've won so many medals now that the Team GB swimming squad are the most successful since 1908, and there's still more medals to be won. The gold was replicated in the triathlon. Jess Learmonth led them out before handing to Johnny Brownlee. The gold medal has always eluded him. He pushed hard on the bike and had a 10-second lead after his run. Next was Georgia Taylor-Brown, the individual silver medalist. She ran hard and handed over to Alex Yee, the new star of British triathlon.
To do it with these guys was, really quite special, and to do it with especially with Johnny completing a set, and Johnny being one of the people who kind of got me into the sport and inspiring me in 2012. To be here 2 games later is pretty insane, and for Johnny to medal at 3 different Olympics is, pretty incredible as well.
And then Super Saturday swerved off course. Dina Asher-Smith, Team GB's fastest ever woman, didn't qualify for the 100-metre final. She revealed afterwards she'd torn her hamstring in July and had been battling just to get to the start line in Tokyo. In a statement, she said, "I'm so disappointed not to make the final because it's Tokyo 2020. Like, this is everything I've trained for the past 2 years. But the last few weeks of my athlete life have been absolutely insane." That hamstring injury was far worse than anyone really knew. And that means that she's now pulling out of the 200 metres in these Olympics, but is still hopeful of competing in the sprint relay. Team GB's Daryl Neater did make the final, but nobody could get near the Jamaicans. In the space of 10.61 seconds, Elaine Thompson-Hera won a back-to-back Olympic gold, the second fastest time ever seen. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Tokyo.
Well, those victories in swimming and triathlon have left Team GB in 6th place with 8 gold medals, just behind Australia on 10. China leads the way with 21 gold so far, with Japan second on 17. And the United States aren't far behind in 3rd with 16 golds. Well, in Tokyo, one of the innovations has been to expand the number of events in which men and women compete together. And it was in 2 of those that Team GB won its gold medals today. Milena Veselinovic reports on the impact that success is having.
These are the tracks that forge Olympic dreams. Boys and girls training side by side on the same course where Team GB sprinter Zoe Clark honed her skills. She helped her team land in the final of the mixed relay, a feat that her teammates at the club say requires strategic thinking.
The main thing is actually the changeovers. You have to navigate them slightly differently, because if you were a woman coming in, you sort of anticipate the speed they're coming in at. They're coming in a little bit slower, so you can judge the time that you would start your run differently. So it's balancing those sort of safety aspects as well and managing those changeover boxes.
Tokyo is the first time mixed relays are happening in the pool and on track. The win clings on the tactical mixing of the order of male and female athletes that can leave the result uncertain until the final seconds.
It's short, it's fast, it's good to watch, and so it is really, really good Olympic sport, and I'm just honoured firstly to be part of the first mixed team relay in the Olympic Games, and then to be first Olympic champions, and that can never be taken away from us.
And it's training together, says this former Olympian, that can bring out the best in both women and men.
I think it's a new training stimulus, and I think people respond to things that are new and exciting and fun. And I'm just thinking back to, the few times I was training with men in the build-up to an Olympic Games, and I absolutely loved it. There's just something about that new environment and it being different to what you normally do, and it lightens the mood.
But it's the visibility of female and male athletes going head-to-head that could have impact for the future. Britain's triumph in the first ever Olympic triathlon mixed relay is historic, and it will inspire a generation of young athletes.
It makes me feel like I'm walking in their footsteps and I can do the same thing that they're doing.
It really does inspire me because it makes me feel like I can do better than them, or even push myself to be in the Olympics, and it makes me want to push myself to train even harder.
It makes me feel very proud of our country and inspires me so I can be like them and maybe even better when I'm older.
Mixed relays are more than just a battle of speed. They're a chance for male and female athletes to shine alongside each other. Milena Veselinovic, Sky News.
A television. One of the themes of this sporting summer has been the impact of the pandemic on top athletes' mental health. From Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles to yesterday, Ben Stokes. Fans of the cricketer we spoke to today were sympathetic to the pressures he and others are under, often forced to be apart from their families in so-called COVID bubbles for weeks or even months at a time. Sky's Hannah Thomas-Peter reports.
The Northern Superchargers women's team plays at Headingley. It's a strange time for the club, coming to terms with the fact that their star player Ben Stokes has announced an indefinite break from all cricket to prioritise his mental well-being.
Everyone deserves a break. You see that obviously with COVID, so I think everyone deserves some time out.
It's sad for us as fans, but more than anything, if you're a real fan, you want him to get well.
Clearly he has to put his health before anything else. I think it sends the right message out.
It's a shame, but I mean, he's a very good player, so it's a shame that he's had to drop out.
Just because you're an elite athlete doesn't mean that you can't have mental health issues.
England Cricket says that Stokes will be given as long as he needs to get well, citing the extraordinary pressures on players who've had to restrict themselves to small COVID-safe bubbles away from friends and family.
It's very difficult for sports people now, to actually find their peak performance. And it has been, the strain of the COVID bubble, which I think after a while can put so much pressure, and especially being, time away from your family. They play a huge role in actually, giving you that comfort, giving you that space to, find your kind of peak performance.
Stokes is not alone. Gymnast Simone Biles has withdrawn from several Olympic events because she's concerned about her mental health. Tennis star Naomi Osaka did the same at a recent tournament, the spotlight of social media piling on the pressure. Some have criticised Stokes for his decision, but there are many more who recognise the courage necessary to confront what often stays hidden.
The more that we understand it's okay to say you're struggling, and then we don't have this ridiculous debate that some people want to have to say, oh, they're doing it because they think they're going to lose. They're doing it because they're spoiled. They're doing it because they're pampered. They're doing it because they're human beings operating at a level that very few people get to operate at.
In facing their own challenges so publicly, Stokes and others are forcing a reckoning in elite sports and sparking a wider conversation about the importance of our mental health. Hannah Thomas-Peter, Sky News.
Police and protesters have clashed in Paris. People took to the streets to march against coronavirus passes, which will be needed to enter restaurants and other venues. Security forces used tear gas and fired a water cannon to break up the rally. It's the third weekend of protests against the health pass, which has been brought in by the French government to halt the spread of the Delta variant. A 5-year-old boy has been found dead in a river in South Wales. His body was found in Ogmore River near Pandy Park, police said. They said it was a tragic incident and have appealed for witnesses to what happened. At least 6 people have died in dozens of wildfires raging across southern Turkey. The fires, which started on Wednesday, have burned down forests as well as homes, and people have been forced to flee villages and beach resorts. The Turkish president has called parts of the country disaster areas. Thousands of teenagers are waiting for specialist hospital beds to treat their eating disorders. Admissions for children have risen by almost a fifth in 2 years. It's led to delays and distress for some, including the 13-year-old daughter of Emma Shepherd. She told us her daughter tries to run away from hospital twice a day. Sadia Chowdhury spoke to her.
Every moment is filled with worry for Emma, mother to a teenager who's among thousands of children waiting for specialist treatment for an eating disorder. Emma's daughter, who we won't name in order to protect her identity, is in a children's hospital, but she's not getting the complete care she needs.
At the moment, she's not with people that are trained to deal with mental health, and she's stuck in a room all the time. She's not getting to engage in activities with other children. She doesn't really do much. She's not allowed out of the building. I just think she's getting worse in there.
NHS data on eating disorders shows a fourfold increase in the number of children and young people waiting for urgent care.
If you're not getting that special input and people who understand how the eating disorder can really start to affect someone's mental health, then generally it's likely that it could deteriorate. They're not getting the right treatment, so they're not getting the people that can support them to really start to fight that voice in someone's head.
NHS England says it's investing in mental health through things like increased funding and the introduction of helplines. A spokesperson told us, thanks to the NHS long-term plan, an additional 345,000 children and young people each year will get help with their mental health and well-being, and £40 million has also been invested in additional inpatient beds. So if you are struggling or have a child who needs help, please continue to come forward to get the care you or they need.
So that's her in the hospital?
Yeah.
Emma says this hasn't worked. Now in her 4th month of waiting, her daughter, she says, makes 2 attempts every day to run away from hospital. Last week she was found 3 miles away.
She just wanted to get away. She got really scared. She was sat in a field for like an hour, and this was after she was crying and hugging me. She was saying, "Mum, I was really scared. I never thought I'd see you ever again. I was sat in this field and it was pitch black."
The hospital told us its clinical teams are trying to provide the best care possible and that it's working with the NHS to help secure a suitable place for Emma's daughter's care. But she says the longer her child has to wait, the more her condition worsens. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News in Sheffield.
Now, for more on the Olympics and the Lions tour of South Africa, it's over to Sky Sports News and Louisa.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality, committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
At the age of 6, I had meningitis, septicemia, and they said I'd never walk again. My Achilles in my left leg shrunk, so that meant that sort of my knees weren't in line with my hips, so they said that I'd constantly have problems with that. A year and a half later, I started going outside. I was back walking, running, and then I got signed for QPR, age 8. So, yeah, it's a miracle really that I was being able to walk and run again.
How did you go from, struggling to walk to being able to run around and be able to play with the kids? But the kids were really good at football.
Both my legs were in plaster for about for exactly how I started walking again, but I used to have to wear like night splints, so my legs were constantly in splints to help me walk. Mentally, when I come out of hospital, I was like a different child. My mum said it wasn't the same child that went into hospital. I had brain damage from it, and I was on life support for 6 days. I've got obviously ADHD, I was diagnosed, OCD, personality disorder. I've got a few things. So that, as well as sort of playing football, was a massive sort of risk. I was lonely. I felt like at a very lonely place with this injury now. Beforehand, I was constantly on a high. I always thought I will get through whatever I go through, and that's the way I do see it, because I do. Whatever I go through, I do get through eventually. And it sort of proved that I do. But I'm driven to really do well, and I don't want to let myself down. My last game I played was on the 20th of January 2020. I've started to feel really unwell, and I felt like my throat was swelling. I remember going to bed and waking up, and I thought I was dying. I remember sitting there on the end of the bed, and sort of saying, sorry.
It's okay.
I remember saying to the nurse, like, my mental health was bad and this has really, really topped it off. And she got sort of a woman to come around and speak to me. And the woman, I know she was trying to help. She was saying, you know, doesn't matter about football, like you can take another journey. And I remember sitting there thinking, another journey? I've worked so hard for this, and it's not about taking another journey. This is something I love and it's been taken away from me. So being on crutches and not being able to move around, not being able to feel my leg, I honestly thought it was the end of the world. I can now only feel the inside and the back and the front. I still can't feel the whole outside of my leg. And they said that probably won't repair. But I think the scary part now is I might not play competitively. I might not. But
Committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
Veni, vidi, vici, Julius Caesar is supposed to have said. But while the Roman emperor may have come and seen and conquered, it's not been the case for the language he spoke in recent years. The government is paying for a trial scheme in 40 schools to try to change the status of Latin, as our correspondent Emma Birchley reports.
And this is one room of a 13-room Roman villa.
The remains of an ancient civilization, accessible for all. But the language the Romans spoke here, in what was once called Verulamium, now St Albans, is seen as the preserve of the privileged few. Now the government is to fund a £4 million project to bring Latin to the classrooms of state secondary schools and pay for visits to heritage sites like this.
All children should have access to all the education, the best education that we can provide in this country. The Romans had so much influence on many things, our laws and the way we do things, a lot of our engineering. They were so advanced in many ways that learning about their culture really helps people to understand how we've developed the way we have.
Salve Helena, Salve Sabina, Donum tibi habeu, Felix yes tibi sit.
In 2014, it became compulsory for all primary pupils from age 7 to learn a language, with Latin being one of the options. But from 11, only modern languages are a requirement, and fewer than 3% of state secondaries currently teach the subject, versus around half of all independent schools. In Verulamium Park, most liked the idea.
I think it would educate people a lot more, and the system would be a lot more advanced.
My sister does Latin, and it opens a gateway for her because it allows her the opportunity to experience different things.
The plan is to introduce Latin in 40 schools to boost the number of children taking it for GCSE. The argument that Latin is elitist and irrelevant has been repeated ad nauseum. But the language is a de facto part of everyday speech, i.e. the abbreviation IE, or EG, for example. Yet despite that, there are those who say we shouldn't be messing with the status quo in the classroom. And with pupils already facing pressure to catch up after the pandemic, critics say it's not a priority.
If I had to learn language, a language that I can now use to communicate my ideas, my thoughts to anyone, it would be rather a waste of my time. I would rather learn programming language. At least the machines are everywhere.
It's thought the focus will be on schools in deprived areas, with the government saying it wants to raise standards with an ambitious curriculum. And it'll certainly be a challenge for the staff who need to be trained up to teach it. Emma Birchley, Sky News, St Albans.
Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview, including this story on the front of tomorrow's Sunday Express. Their headline there, incredibly blessed. It says Carrie on the news today of her pregnancy. We'll be talking about that and lots else in just a moment with the author and journalist Ella Whelan and author and historian at Oxford University, Peter Frankopan, who is standing by, ready and waiting. We'll be with them after the break.